Well, thank you everybody for being here, and thank you, Christian, for inviting me or convincing me to give this talk this morning. I am Jennifer Possley. I am the Conservation Program Coordinator at Fairchild Tropical Botanic Garden. And I have a co-author on this talk, which is Kevin Kalis with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who, thank you, Kevin, for providing some of the data for this talk. I'm going to be talking about the state of pine rocklands, and I want to just first acknowledge that pine rocklands are more than just Florida. We also have them in the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos, but what I know best is South Florida, and we're all in South Florida, so that is where I will be concentrating. And specifically looking at the Lower Keys and the Miami Rock Ridge, especially the parcels outside of Everglades National Park. So we all know pine rocklands if we're sitting in this room, probably. We love them, they're beautiful. They've even been featured on a postage stamp. And we also care about pine rocklands because they're so biodiverse. They're really high biodiversity and yet very imperiled. There's more than 100 species of shrubs and trees, more than 300 herb and grass species, more than 30 endemic species, which is exceptionally high. And of course, we've got the tiger beetle, the key deer, Bartram scrub hairstreak, and lots of exciting fauna. But pine rocklands have quite a bit of threats against them as well. In the Lower Keys, the primary threat we would say is sea level rise. And then up here in Miami, fragmentation and fire suppression are, I think, the tied for #1. And you could kind of reverse this and say sea level rise is definitely a coming threat in the Rock Ridge, and fragmentation and fire suppression are also an issue in the Keys. There's a lot of issues that are especially bad in Miami that aren't quite so applicable in the Keys. And that includes, we have really prevalent invasive species here. Funding is far from adequate. Cost per acre to manage is very high. So a lot of different agencies have to coordinate to get anything done. And because of all the above, the logistics of burning are really difficult. So acknowledging all that, back in 2019, a group of us got together to work on the Pine Rockland Business Plan. This was an effort led by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and funded by the Coastal Program through Kevin Kalis. And everybody listed here, especially Nature Conservancy, was in the lead. We had a series of meetings and workshops, and we were looking at pine rocklands in Miami, east of Everglades, and in the Lower Keys. What we did, over lots of time, the first thing we did was figure out what pine rocklands are we talking about? What are we dealing with? How many parcels? How many acres? So a lot of the work was GIS that the Nature Conservancy did. We looked at all of the rare species within pine rocklands, and then we got together to evaluate them. And we looked at the vegetation in pine rocklands, and we held them up against some targets that we developed. And it was actually the Institute for Regional Conservation developed these targets based on work that several of us have done over the years. And we had a goal for pine rocklands, for slash pine, palms, hardwoods, and then we wanted areas to be dominated by grasses and herbs with a short fire return interval. So we did over 150 parcels that were evaluated by different people on the teams, where some of this is actually done out in the real world and some was done virtually. And we have some results from that effort. And we found that about 70% of the 150 parcels were classified as declining, and only low 20s were showing to be improving. And then furthermore, every parcel got a score, a condition score that was kind of an amalgam of different measures. And you can see clearly here the preserves that have burned in less than 5 years have the highest score, and the score goes down and down over time as the time since fire increases. So what we know so far from the Pine Rockland Business Plan is we got information about what we have, what we're dealing with. We looked at how much things cost, And in summary, we found that condition is declining across the board in the majority of pine rockland parcels. The costs to restore are really high, constraints are many, and the stakes are high because there's so many rare species in our pine rocklands. And I'm a rare species biologist. I work at Fairchild Garden. I've been there for 25 years. And when Christian asked me to give this talk, my mind immediately goes to rare plants and thinking, what can the rare plants tell us about the state of pine rocklands? So I started to think about just the federally listed species because we have hundreds of rare plants here in Florida pine rocklands. I was on the Pine Rockland Business Plan Rare Plant Committee, Rare Species Committee, and the spreadsheet was, I don't know, trying to compile all of the rare species was an overwhelming task. But limiting it just to federally listed plants, I started to think about what has happened just during my career, where I started here in the early 2000s, and here it is 25 years later. What's changed? And I'm aware of quite a few listed species occurrences that have disappeared over the years, and just kind of an informal list I put together. And I know nobody can read this, but the point is that it's a long list. These are 31 listed plant occurrences that were present around 2000 and are now gone or thought to be gone. And this is every listed pine rockland species except the Galactia smallii and Euphorbia garberii. And one thing that really stands out here is that Camassice deltoidea, the deltoid spurge complex, is a major part of this list. And I think deltoid spurge is really an indicator of what's going on in pine rocklands. It really tells us a lot about the state of pine rocklands. It doesn't get any lower and shorter than this species. Its range coincides perfectly with that of the pine rocklands in South Florida, with the 4 different subspecies found throughout the range of the rocklands. It's super fire adapted. It's got most of its biomass is below ground. After a fire, it resprouts very quickly and starts blooming. It just loves fire. But with the absence of fire, it can easily get smothered by leaves and pine needles. So this guy, I think, is a really good indicator. So looking at deltoid spurge then versus now, in 2001, it was known to be in 32 preserves, and today it's only found in 20. And especially hard hit is subspecies deltoidea, which is the northernmost subspecies. And that kind of makes sense to me. That's the area where it's the northernmost part of the range. It's very urbanized and really difficult to burn. So I think that's in part a factor of lack of fire. This is just a list of the sites that have lost deltoid spurge. There's a couple on here that I'm not sure about. The first 2 especially. 5 minutes, okay. But most of these haven't burned in decades. And of the ones that have, there's just been 1 or 2 fires. An exception is Deering West. I think Ron Eman may have burned twice, I'm not sure. And Trinity Pineland is an exception. And I just want to talk about Trinity Pineland as a case study. So this aerial photo shows Trinity in 2005, and there was kind of a nice canopy gap, and that's where deltoid spurge was located, along with a bunch of other rare herbs. But by 2012, the trees grew in and that gap totally closed. And the deltoid spurge was not seen after 2013. Its habitat just disappeared. Trinity looked like this on the inside. It was kind of dark, very heavy dominance from palms and pines. But it started to burn in 2011. There was a small fire. I think you can see some singed pine needles in the background of this slide from that. 2013, there was a slightly larger wildfire. And then in 2018, there was a wildfire that the EEL program, who manages this preserve, was able to work with the firefighters to turn it into a prescribed fire that burned the entire preserve. And today it looks like a very different place. It's got that savanna look that we want to see with really dominant understory, grasses and herbs. Unfortunately, there's a development that popped up in the interim that we have to look at, but other than that, this looks fantastic. We even have data from Fairchild's Pine Rockland transect monitoring that kind of shows this effect as well. Back in 2010, when we sampled here, you can think of this as the red is the stuff you don't want and the green is the stuff you do want. Red is pines and palms, but the park was about 80% pines and palms and just 20% understory. But today that's increased to 30% understory and available ground and just whatever, 60, 70% palms and pines. So the trajectory of Trinity Preserve was going in the wrong direction, but with just 3 fires in this little bit of time, we were able to see it turn around. And obviously there was a lot of very careful management of the preserve, taking advantage of the fire, doing follow-up for invasive species. This is one of the pet projects of the eel program and of its longtime preserve manager, Joy Klein, who's here today. And it's a testament to her why it looks so fantastic. And we've got this move from the declining category to the improving category. And then just ending on a high note, we've been able to put deltoid spurge back into this preserve. It's been really challenging. The species is not easy to work with, but we've managed to get 2 plants reestablished, and these are them. And they're working hard, and the habitat is holding steady for them, and we're hoping to be able to add more species. So just hopefully Trinity pineland and the deltoid spurge story can be an inspiration for some of these other pine rocklands that are in the declining category. It's not too late. Even if a species is lost, we can put it back and we can put the habitat back. So that's all I got. Thank you.